Hello everybody, thank you for joining. And as I said, questions will get candy. Here we are talking about Apache Maven 4 and why it's awesome. Most of you have used Apache Maven 3, and this talk will do a comparison between Apache Maven 3 and Maven 4 features, how things have changed, and what are some new things available in Apache Maven 4 that didn't exist in Apache Maven 3. All the content that I'm sharing is available on GitHub, github.com/Guntur. So please feel free to check that code out and contribute or suggest any kind of improvements to that section as well. So it's all out there, and whenever we go to the code sections, you will notice that the GitHub link will be displayed at the bottom of the screen, right? There's also being video recorded, so you can also go back later on and access the GitHub link. Awesome. Going back, quick about me. I'm a Java champion. I've been an Apache Maven user and contributor for a while. I'm a jug leader at 2 Java user groups. I blog, I tweet. My website is listed out, and I am a Saganist. For those of you who know Carl Sagan, no? Okay. Please do check out Carl Sagan later on. And a little bit of an LOL, because this frequently happens with me. My name gets confused. It is Guntur, G-U-N-T-U-R, not Guntur, as in egg hunter. I can't expand this screen, but it's going to go back to a better screen in a bit. Yeah, so a Guntur is an egg hunter from the Ready Player One. I am not. Right? I'm Guntur, so just letting you know. Awesome. That silly little thing out of the way, let's go to what we're going to talk about today. How many of you here are familiar with reactor POMs? Aggregators, reactor POMs. Okay. Great. So we'll start there. So I saw a lot of people did not know what it is. A reactor POM is something that allows you or facilitates the build of other modules in your code base. So it does not carry forward any inheritance of either properties or dependencies. It just triggers builds for other submodules or subprojects in your project hierarchy. So if I have a root, the root being a reactor in this case, the root itself does not produce any artifacts. What it does is in turn passes on my Maven commands to my other children, such as child 1, child 2, child 3, and the bomb, which we will talk about in a bit. So whenever I run a Maven command, in some order that is not determined by me, but by Maven, these will get invoked with the same set of commands. Okay? And that is number one. How do I look at that? In my project root POM, which is the root as listed over here, I have the name root and I have modules, and the modules are bomb, child 1, child 2, and child 3. Now, although I listed them out in the sequence, it is not necessary that they are built in the sequence. Obviously, most of you are familiar with this, but I'm just sharing to reiterate. Maven determines the order in which these get built, but that is exactly how modules get laid out and built together. So any Maven command you issue against the root gets passed on to each of these. So the project structure looks like so. In my code base, and bear with me as I try to minimize these. So I have my bill of materials, bomb, which I'll talk about in a bit, child 1, child 2, child 3, and child 3 itself is another reactor POM that has child 31 and child 32, right? So the hierarchy looks like so, where I have root, I have a bill of materials, child 1, child 2, child 3, and child 3's children, child 31 and child 32. In addition to this, child 32 depends on child 2, as you can see the dependency relationship here, and then child 2 itself depends on child 1, right? And this is the project setup we have. This is very similar to a real life project where you can have, let us say, a commons, and this commons probably is used by something else like services, and the services are then used by some, let us say, an HTTP front end or whatever else, right? A controller layer of some sorts. So that is the same kind of approach we have in our project structure, and we will run this against Maven 3 and Maven 4. And there's a hands-on session, so we'll be doing a lot of, I guess, command line typing and figuring out how Maven works. What are the common pain points with Apache Maven 3? Right? These are some of the things that I will share with you. Number one, it is extremely painful to maintain versions in multi-module projects. Any of you who've used multi-module know this. When you have versions that need to be upgraded, you have to either hard code them or do some sort of a magic sprinkler with some kind of a property that you pass, but you need additional plugins for that, right? A Maven flatten plugin or something like that. So just to expand on the, once again, pardon the font, this is small, but this is something I don't usually share. I'm just telling you that these exist. For each pain point, I also have like subsections where you can go and read more about it. So in case of a version management, there are plugins and tools that you could use, such as CI-friendly Flatten Maven plugin, and this allows you to actually pass a $revision variable that you can use. And you can use this in Maven 3, and we'll show you an example of that in a minute, right? So Maven 3 allows you to somehow do this, but it is done by third-party tools that you can use. And here is a very quick example of how that looks like. If you notice in the root POM, I probably declare it as the Outbrain Swinfra CI-friendly Flatten Maven plugin, and it flattens. What this does for me is it provides me the ability to create a $revision variable to use as my version number. And we use this with Apache Maven 3, so we have not yet gone to Apache Maven 4. Now, the same can be true of other children, such as child 1, child 2, child 3, where you have a $revision. Very quickly, command prompts, I have 2 command prompts. So bear with me while I show you both the command prompts. This is Maven. Ignore the colors, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just showing you that there is a Maven 3 and there is a Maven 4. Give me a second. And Maven 4. Okay. So in the Maven 3, if I were to just go to my, navigate to my project, so projects. Okay. I have my project set up here. I'm just going to run a Maven clean install. Okay. Ignore the Java versions. I just upgraded to JDK 24, so it's going to complain a lot. But here is what came out. The first thing, I don't know how much you can read from back there, but I'll just highlight it so that it's more visible. It's just like my bill of materials got created with a $revision, no value. Then my root got created with a 3.0 snapshot, and everything else did get created with a 3.0 snapshot. There's still Maven 3. How did this happen? So in my root POM, I have a revision property that I set to 3.0.0 snapshot. And that took effect for everything except the bill of materials. Because the bill of materials does not share the inheritance from the root. It has its own inheritance structure. So it did not pick up the 3.0.0 snapshot, and it got a $revision variable. How can I change this? Now, if I were to go back here, and instead of just running a Maven clean install of 3.0.0 snapshot, I am now going to do a -d and pass it a revision of 3.1.0. Okay. So this is a new version of Maven I created with a 3.1.0 version. For those of you who can't read, no worry not. All I did was a -d revision equals, and I passed it along. So if I were to run this code, it now produces all my child artifacts, and those look like so. They got BOM, root, etc., all set to the version of 3.1.0. And how do I verify this, right? This is easy to verify. I can go to my Finder. If it does show up, come on, Finder, okay. Under my repository, my packaging is none.cg-util, cg being my initials. And under that, it created all these artifacts. And we should have 2 sets of artifacts for everything because we just ran 2 builds. So my BOM, there should be a $revision and a 310. $revision because it did not carry over the property that was set in the root. But from child 1 onwards, you'll see that everything has a 3.0.0 snapshot and a 3.1.0. We just ran these 2 builds, right? So there was an ability for me to change versions just by flipping a flag on a command prompt, and I can generate any version from there on, right? So it simplifies things, but it required a third-party plugin. Let's go back to look at other pain points that we have. There is no implicit way to separate your build info from your consumer info in Maven 3. Why is this important, right? Several of us, when we write our Maven files, have instructions in our POM XML file. And these instructions could be your distribution management section. They could be your SCM details. They could be your passwords. They could be sensitive information, or they could be information that is localized to you. Like you have your own internal corporate repository and you're putting that information out there. Why does anyone else in the world who's a consumer of your library need this information? That's build information. It is not meant for consumers, right? So why would you need this? You don't. And that is something that we are forced to deal with in older versions of Maven, right? The build and the consumer were always placed together. Information such as developer information, information such as what your dependency management looks like, your plugins, etc., are not needed by the end consumer. Yet they make it all the way to your .pom file, which exists, on the internet when you push it out there. So, for instance, if you were to look at this .pom file, let's open this real quick. You will notice that it has my project information, my model information, my parent. Why does anyone need to know what my artifact's parent is? Outside of my build structure, no one needs to know this. No consumer needs this. Why does any consumer need to know the properties I use? They don't, right? They don't need to know the build plugins I use. These are all information that is extraneous and not useful for an end consumer. So where is the separation between the build and the consumer information in Maven 3? It didn't exist. Are there tools that can do this for you? Yes, absolutely. There are tools that allow you to do it. But once again, it's a third-party inference that you have to pull in, and it sometimes works and other times causes problems. So it's not an ideal situation. We'll cover this as a pain point. The next pain point we'll look at is how we handle dependency versions of sibling modules. Sibling modules being, in my case, child 2 is a sibling module of child 1, and child 3 is a sibling module of child 2, right? Because they are adjacently placed, and sometimes I may need a dependency of one to the other. Where do I specify versions? And those of us who have used Maven in earnest know this. When we change the versions of one just to test the other, it's pain point. You hard code stuff and then you have to move forward. However, with more recent versions of Maven, that has changed. In here, you notice that the same project dependency, you have to declare the version number for the child 1 artifact in child 2. You have to do that. There is no other way out, because version was a required field in Maven 3. And I've probably already given away what Maven 4 does, but that is something we will take a look at. The next pain point we'll look at is who agrees with this statement. All of us developers are lazy, yes? And it's a good thing. I mean, it is great that we are lazy, otherwise we would never have built out these awesome inventions, right? So it's a good thing. But at the same time, because we are lazy, sometimes we assume things will be done for us. And one of the most common assumptions and bad practices several Maven developers do is they ignore specifying plugin versions of default plugins. And this is painful because you only through discovery of running a build find out that something failed because you are using a more older version of a plugin, right? It's a very common thing. And once the build fails, then you go research and like, aha, that's what failed. I need to fix this. And it's a short-term burn, and then you forget it, and then you repeat the same mistake over and over again. How do we avoid this? Maven 4 helps you avoid this. Okay. And finally, the last main point I'll take a look at is there is no explicit bill of materials declaration or packaging in Maven 3. When you create, let's say, a Spring Boot BOM, it is actually a .pom file. There is no BOM, right? There's no bill of materials artifact. It's a POM artifact, a project object model artifact that you're getting, and that's not the same, right? The experience is not the same because someone looking at the file would see a POM packaging, not a BOM packaging, right? So it's a POM, not a BOM, and that's what Maven 4 changes. So those are some of the pain points that we'll take a look at with Apache Maven 3 and how they got fixed with Maven 4. I have two instances of my IDE, one with a bluish tinge, one with a brownish tinge. I don't know how much you can notice the difference, but the blue tinge is Maven 4, the brown tinge is Maven 3. So let's move on to very quickly show you how these things changed with Maven 4. So the first thing we'll take a look at is how Maven 4 looks like. Small subtle changes with Maven 4. Number one, the schemas have evolved. The schemas now are 4.1.0 namespace, 4.1.0 schema locations, and model version being 4.1.0. So the model version changed. There is a trick to this. You currently are building with Maven 3. Everything you built is with model version 4.0.0, right? Everything that you build has 4.0.0. And then you go put your artifacts out there. Along with your artifact, you get a .pom file. Let me go back real quick, illustrate what I'm talking about. You get a .pom file. Guess what the version of the model in this POM file is? 4.0.0. Why is this important? This is consistent because everything that you've been building as your artifact graph, all systems that rely on this .pom file rely on this model version. If you were to change this model version, it breaks a lot of other systems right away. They don't have time to catch up. So what Apache Maven 4 does is what I'm going to show you by running a build first and then talking about it. So for consistency's sake, let's first do the same two builds that we did in the past. I'm going to navigate to my project. Okay. I have my same Maven project, very similar to what I had in Maven 3. And I'm going to run two commands. I'm first going to run the Maven clean install. And you'll notice that it does perform the same amount of consistencies that Maven 3 brought you. Let me just get rid of this window here. It created a 4.0.0 snapshot. And notice that everything is 4.0.0 snapshot. There's no $revision. So there's a BOM, root, child 1, child 2, child 3. And if I were to go to my finder structure, you'll notice that there is a 4.0.0 snapshot created for everything. So there's a 4.0.0 snapshot for child 2, child 3, etc. I'm not going to belabor you to going into each of those, but let's very quickly jump into one of these. What changed? You'll notice a few changes right away. Number one, you have a build POM and you have another POM. The build POM is used by you to build, by the build meister to build, and then the consumer POM is what you push out to the repositories, and they'll have different content. So let's take a quick look at the content for the build POM. The build POM shows you the more modern version of the model. This is for you. This is on your computer. It has the flexibility where you don't specify a version. Model 4 required version to be required. Model 4.1 does not. So there is a difference, and the build POM allows you to do that, right? And it has sections that matter to you while you're building your project, right? Such as the parent information, such as the properties, etc. It doesn't have much more than that. Now let's go visit what our consumer POM looks like. And here's my consumer POM, very different. Number one, the model version still shows 4.0.0, which means versions become mandatory, which means my artifact will have a version number, right? It is still complying to the old-fashioned structures that other services seem to depend on. It does not have properties. I don't need to expose my properties. I don't need to expose information that is pertinent to the build and not to the consumer. So everything the consumer needs is listed in the consumer POM that gets pushed out, and everything the build needs is in the build info POM, which is never going anywhere else. Maven 4 makes this separation for you. No third-party tools included. Okay, that was feature number one. That was actually pain point number 2, but let's also go back to pain point number 1. What was pain point number 1? It was that I had to use some third-party tool to use a $revision version, right? Boilerplate. In case of Maven 4, I have the $revision variable, but there is no third-party plugin I use anywhere. No plugins. Just the standard Maven plugins you'll notice is clean, resources, compiler, surefire, jar, install, deploy. No third-party plugins of any sort. Maven provides you this feature out of the box where $revision variables exist. You don't need anything special for that. So it makes it very simple for a developer. And there's zero maintenance because it's all built into Maven. Awesome. So we covered pain point 1 and pain point 2. So let's look at the other pain points. Version support is improved, we looked at that. Separate POMs, we looked at that. Let's look at the third one, the implicit versions for dependency sibling modules. So let's go to child 2. And you notice, I depend on child 1, and the version number is gone. There is no need for a version specification. Maven specification 4.0.0 mandated, the schema mandates that the version attribute be required, or the version element be required. Maven 4 does not have that requirement. So it allows you to create artifacts that depend on siblings, and you don't have to specify the versions of siblings. It automatically imports that. Now let's take a look at the actual generated POM to see what the dependency value looks like. So if I were to go back here to child 2 and look at the generated POM, both the build and the snapshot, we'll take a look at both. So if I were to go to my consumer POM that goes out, you will notice, come on, here, child 1, it automatically got the version for you because this is version 4.0.0. as I can verify over here. Now, going back, if I were to look at the build POM, what does it look like? You will notice that model version is 4.1.0 and my dependency does not have a version number. Maven is generating the version in its effective POM for me. I'm not doing anything here. Awesome. So that covered the feature that we were talking about with, give me a second, with the implicit version numbers. Now, as I was telling you, we developers are lazy. So let's go take a quick look at something that shows my laziness here. You notice how I have a Maven compiler plugin, version 3.13.0. Let's go back and do the second build that we did not complete here. So I'm going to do a Maven -d revision equals 4.1.0, and I'm going to do a clean install again. If only I can type. Sorry about that. All right, so we do the build. Let's take a quick look here what happened. We go to the M2 directory, repositories, none, cgutils, and I have 4.1.0. So all of you saw that 4.0 got built. Now let's take a look at something that happened here, interestingly enough, when I do a compile. So I'm going to scroll back until I find this, so bear with me. I'm looking for the compiler plugin. So if you find it before me, just shout. You see that section here. It says Maven compiler 3.13.0 compile, etc. Now, what happens when I go and comment this section out? Can anyone tell me what happens? Sorry? Okay, you get a candy. So feel free to pick one, or I can throw one from here. All right, maybe I'll waste time by doing this, so I'm going to just try this real quick, okay? Almost. Awesome, awesome. Thank you. So it'll pick the default. Where does it pick the default from? Maven itself has the default versions of the plugins that you use. How often is Maven released? Not as often as the plugins. So do plugins go stale? And the answer is yes. Do you know that they went stale? The answer is no. When do you find out? When you run a build, right? So if I were to now run this build again with this commented out, so I'm going to now create the third flavor, and I'm going to do a Maven -d revision equals 4.2.0 clean install. Let's see what it does. And you'll right away notice something flip by very quickly, but we'll scroll back and take a look at that. Okay. Do you see something new here? It says version not locked for your default bindings for the Maven compiler plugin. So it's warning you. And if you use good CI tools, you can actually block builds when there is a warning or an error. So you can actually prevent your systems from running into unexpected issues because of wrong compilers by you actioning against warnings. This is what Maven 4 provides. Maven 3 never had this feature. In Maven 3, it would silently build with an older version of the compiler and you would not have any clue that this happened. Maven 4 prevents that. And if you use systems where you pay heed to warnings or errors that the build output gives you, you can actually stop a build, right? So there is that feature that exists now with Maven 4 and it's amazing. People such as myself who've been burned in the past by using wrong versions of the plugins know very well how important this feature is. Yes, please.
So far, looks like most of them are optional. So, are they backward compatible with 3.9.9? Can I just upgrade to 4 and they work, or do we need Maven files to be changed when I upgrade?
Okay. So the question is, are my project files, if I were to use Maven 4, are they backward compatible with Maven 3.9.9 setup? And the answer is for most part, yes. You won't avail of the facilities that Maven 4 gives you unless you change the schema, obviously. So you can still have a hard-coded version with model schema 4.0.0, and run it with Maven 4, nothing is going to stop you. You'll see a lot more warnings, and I'll get to that in a minute. But other than that, does it work? Yes, it works. It is available, and we will take a look at that real quick. What does change though? That's a very interesting question you ask. What does change is in Maven 3 and below, you had modules. In Maven 4, they're now called sub-projects. That is a significant change. And if you were to run it with modules, you're going to see a lot more warnings issued when you run your Maven commands. So just be aware and prepared. It's going to say modules are deprecated, please use sub-projects. They're deprecated, which means you can still run your build, but you'll see a lot more warnings. And like I was saying, if you use a CI system that actually pays heed to the warnings and errors, you could actually fail your build with that too, right? So does it work out of the box? Yes. You won't avail of the Maven 4 features, but you can still continue with Maven 4 if you have a Maven 3 based POM file. Does that answer your question? Awesome. All right, great. So we covered everything, and the last thing that I want to touch upon is there is a BOM POM file. And the BOM POM file basically is a packaging bill of materials rather than a POM. It makes it very easy for us to distinguish between what's a bill of materials and what's an aggregator of sorts, right? So there is that distinction now possible with Maven 4 because the schema got updated to 4.10. They could add more enumerations, right? So those are some awesome changes that Maven 4 brought in. But wait, there's more. Sorry, I did not want to do a sales switch, but yeah. So there are other changes that Maven 4 brings in, and let's take a look at 4 changes, right? I don't want to spend too much time, but I just want to go over a couple of changes that Maven 4 brought in. How do you build an aggregator and its child modules? How many of you now know what an aggregator is? An aggregator, let me just reiterate. The root is an aggregator because it aggregates several sub-projects and runs them together. A reactor or an aggregator is something that allows you to trigger builds on other sub-projects that exist in your project space. So, how do you build an aggregator and its child modules in Maven 3? What do you do? Let's assume I have this project structure. Where is my project structure? It should be somewhere here. Okay. In this project structure, I want to build root and I want to build these 4. How do I do that? What would be the Maven command?
It would be a Maven clean install root.
Okay. How about this command? Maven, I'll use a compiler. But if I were to just build, let us say, child 3, child 31 and 32, what would I do? I'm at the root. What do I do? I could run a command that says Maven clean compile or build or install minus project list, pass in child 3, and say also make dependents. So it would build child 3 and it would build the children of child 3 because I have an also make dependents clause. Similarly, I could also use an expanded version of the flag dash dash also make dependents, which is more explicit than a dash AMD, but does the same thing. Or the worst possible way you could do this is actually provide the hierarchies of projects you want to build, which is child 3 slash child 31, child 3 slash child 32, right? So there are different ways in which you could have done this. What do you do with Maven 4? You just run this command and it does exactly that. The expectation is when you run Maven child 3, and for those of you at the back can't see, I'm going to run this command on the terminal, so bear with me for a minute. So when you run a project list child 3, it looks for any further dependents of child 3 and builds them. It's the principle of least astonishment being followed by Maven. Is the expectation is when I'm building something, everything under it also needs to get built, right? So it's a deviation from what Maven's original standards were, and we'll look at this in the next slide. But let's quickly run this, right? I want not to just make statements, I want to prove that what I'm saying works. So here I am, I'm going to my command prompt and I'm going to my red command prompt, which is Maven 3, right? So here I am on Maven 3 and I will run this command. All I'm saying is Maven clean compile, passing in the project list of child 3 and declaring it to also make dependents, right? And just to keep it simple, I'm going to pass in a revision minus the revision equals 3.3.0, okay? New version number because we don't want to overlap what we already had. Great. So something failed, which is interesting. Child 2 jar did not exist, but that's fine. What it tries to build is child 3 child 31 and child 32. I'll take a look at what failed in a minute, but I'm not connected to the internet for some reason. It could not find my artifacts, but that's okay. It tried to build child 3, child 31 and child 32 for me, which is what should have happened, and it executed as expected, but I had to remember and also make dependence flagged. Now let's go try doing the same thing on Maven 4. So I'm going to go back to my prompt. I'm going to my black prompt, which is Maven 4, and I'll run this command. I don't pass any flags to this. If I were to run this, you see it built child 3, child 31 and child 32. Same command, lesser number of flags for me to remember or focus on. Now the equivalent change where I only want to build, let's say, child 3 and not its dependence. I deliberately just want to build a project and nothing more than the project. In this case, in the picture, I don't know if you notice the picture, it's the same as the project structure, just condensed. I've highlighted what I'm building. So here I'm just building child 3, not building child 31, not building child 32. Older Maven, the command that we used to build everything on the hierarchy was now, is represented by the same command we use here. And if we were to run this command on the Maven command prompt, the red one, you will see it actually tries to just build child 1 somewhere, child 3. It only tries to build child 3. Now with Maven 4, you can do something called non-recursive, which means just build my project and nothing else. Just build what I'm telling you to build and don't go any further with a -n flag, right? And this does exactly the same thing where it builds child 3 and nothing else. But the command is more intuitive. You now know what you're building. It is a -n or a -- non-recursive, which tells you, hey, just build my project and don't build anything else. Forget that anything else below this exists, which is an awesome change. And now you think about it, right? With this change, when you try to build the aggregator and its child modules, it is obvious that when a child changes, you want anything under it also to be built to be verified. But if you're very sure that nothing else changed, you actually force it through a non-recursive flag, which makes it more intuitive. This did not exist in Maven 4. Maven 3, Maven 3 was not about intuition, it was about getting things to work with flags. So Maven 4 put in a lot more thought about how to do things right? The next command, it is impossible to do this with Maven 3. You want to build a module plus the dependencies which exist outside of the scope. You just cannot do it in Maven 3, right? It's not possible. So in this case, I want to build root. I want to build child 32 first. And when I build child 32, I want child 3 to be built because it's the parent. And because child 32 depends on child 2, I want to build that. Because child 2 depends on child 1, I want to build that. And these all are triggered by the root, I want to build root. That's not possible in Maven 3. Just not possible. With Maven 4, you can actually run this command and it works. And there's an also make command that allows you to do this. So if I were to run this command on Maven 4, it would build for me child 32 because I'm navigating to child 32, calculates the dependencies of child 32, finds if they are on the project path and builds them for me all the way to the root. So let's run this command real quick. And I'm going to go to my just Maven 4 because Maven 3 does not support this. So if I were to run this, and just to make things more interesting, I'm going to give it a new version number. So what did it build? It built child 32, built child 3 because parent, built child 2 because child 32 depends on child 2, built child 1 because child 2 depends on child 1, and built the root. So it does all this for me. It built the hierarchy as I needed it. Cannot do this in Maven 3. There's no known way to do this. You'll have to run project list and then probably run 2 commands to get this done. The final change I want to talk to you about is how to build a module plus its dependents rather than dependencies which go upward. I want to build dependents, which means I want to build child 1, which implies I will build child 2, which implies I will build child 32. And why is this? I made a change in child 1. I want to know the impact on child 2, and I want to know the impact on child 32. Such a simple feature did not exist in Maven 3. Did not exist, right? I don't know how we coped, but it is not possible to do this with Maven 3. With Maven 4, you can say also make dependents, and it does this for you. So I navigate to child 1 and say also make dependents. So it will figure out the dependents. In this case, it knows child 2 is a dependent, builds child 2, and it knows child 2 has a further dependent on child 32, so it builds child 32 for you. And let's just prove it rather than just talk about it. I'm going to go to my command prompt. I'm obviously at a child location now, so I'm going to navigate out first. So I'm back at Maven 4, and I'll run this command. And just to make things interesting, I'm going to change the version number to something different. Ooh, something failed. Interesting. Sorry? What did I do? Oh, so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Oh, I already was in the. Okay. Let's see what it does. What did it do? It built child 1, found out that child 2 depends on child 1, built that, found out that child 32 depends on child 2, so built that. This was not possible in Maven 3. Imagine how we lived our lives without this feature, right? I make a change and I don't know what my dependent projects are doing because there's no easy way for me to build the dependents. And Maven 4 gives you this feature. Well, with that, those are the features I wanted to share with you on Apache Maven 3 and 4. I can open it up for questions if anyone has any. Yes, please.
Less than a year ago, I migrated a few dozen POM files to the CI-friendly plugin. Am I going to have to redo a lot to get them to work with maybe 4th version?
Okay. So the only change that I know of when you're making with a CI-friendly plugin, if you were using for the $revision, not for any kind of interpolations, right? If you're just using $revision, get rid of the plugin and you're all set. Just the plugin section. That's it. It's as simple as that. And it works like a charm. I've actually done this, so I'm telling you it works. Good. You get a candy, so. All right. I'm going to try this. All right. Okay, you had a question?
So yeah, when does it come out?
When does it come out? The question is, when does Maven 4 come out? That is something eagerly being anticipated. We are currently on Maven 4.0.0 release candidate 2. Wishful thinking, probably towards Q3 of this year is when Maven 4 should come out. But I mean, I'm already using it and it's stable enough. So just letting you know. You get a candy. There was a question here first and then I'll come back to you. Yes, please.
Do we need to have repository managers support new version? What does it do to older version of the artifacts?
Okay. So the question is, do I need a repository manager change because of the schema changes? And the answer is, since there are now two different POMs, one being a build POM and one being a consumer POM, a decision was made to keep the consumer POM at the older model level. So nothing changes there. The only change is on your local build systems where you use a newer version of the schema, i.e. 4.1.0. So there is no impact on the artifact repositories at all. So it's been kept consistent. Good? All right, you get a candy? You good? No candy? Okay, I'll eat one on your behalf. All right, yes sir. Yeah.
I don't know if maybe this is the presentation, but what is the difference essentially? What does it do? Does it strip off a bunch of unneeded scenes from the form to make it better?
Not much. I mean, it is still the same structure. That's an excellent question. Let's take a quick look at what the bomb looks like.
Then we will look towards something that will make writing bombs same.
So not much of improvement in the bomb itself, but let's take a look at what the consumer bomb looks like, right? So that will answer your question. The only difference you'll see is the packaging gets converted back to POM, right? So it's all a visual or a user experience difference, nothing more than that. Everything else stays the same in whatever artifact goes to the artifact repository, still is a POM file, except when you're creating it, as a developer or an author of a bomb, you know you're working with a bomb file, not a POM file. That's about.
all the heavy lifting happens in this like separation between consumer and the other POM. So because we still need to remove a bunch of stuff from that. So
Nothing
yes,
changes. Nothing changes at all.
that already happens just due to the introduction of the consumer POM.
Correct, correct. So it's a start, it's a beginning, and maybe there'll be more improvements down the line, but at least there's a start where you know that you're creating a bill of materials POM during your development cycle, right? And in the end, it is going to get converted to a POM anyways, because that's what the artifact manager, remember, everything you're doing is to keep compatibility on the produced artifacts that go reside on the artifact manager. You do not want to change those, right? So everything that goes to the artifact repository will look as it used to prior to Maven 4. So your model version will still be 4.0.0. So your packagings are limited to what was available in 4.0.0. But what does change is when you go look at the build POMs, that is where the difference lies. And you will notice here, you will see it as a BOM packaging with a model version of 4.1.0. There's a separation now, right? What you use as build instructions have been separated out from what the consumer needs to consume your artifact. Good? All right, somehow I'm going to throw a candy. You're good? I will eat all the candy on your behalf. Whoever is not taking candy, there's more candy for me. All right, any other questions? Yes, please.
I'm just looking down to like this bomb situation. Like I wasn't aware of it. Does it basically work as some sort of like jar manager, like where it just manages all like the jar dependencies within a project? Say for example, I have like an enterprise project that uses a jar, and then this jar then depends on like another external jar, and then that jar depends on another jar that is used where
The
all
transit
the jars
is.
originates for.
Right.
And the ideal solution would be to like set up a bomb that would just like manage all those jars within them. So when I do like a dependency change on say like the main jar, it would like cascade down into the other ones.
Correct. So the question is, what is the BOM file doing is, am I putting down the transitive dependencies and their versions in the BOM file and ensuring that the versions are what we get to use? And the answer is yes. And that is how it was in Maven 3 and that is how it is in Maven 4. Nothing changed on the BOM itself. So that remains exactly the same. Would you like a candy? I'm going to try throwing one. Okay. And I'm a bad pitcher, but let's see. Yes, please.
We use third-party plugins. Do we need to wait for them to be updated for version 4? Or the old plugins can be used? How stable is version 4 for production readiness?
Okay. So the question is, I use third-party plugins. Do I need for the third-party plugins to upgrade to anything for me to use Apache Maven 4? And the answer is no. As we already discussed, Maven 3 POM files are compatible with Maven 4. You just cannot use the features of Maven 4, but they are compatible. So if you were to just lift and shift a project and start using it with Apache Maven 4, with the POMs as they were set up, you may see a bunch of warnings in your build, but nothing is going to fail. It'll work, right? But have you leveraged anything Maven 4? No. That's the only difference.
What if they have transient dependencies that says modules instead of sub-project?
What if they have transient dependencies that say modules instead of sub-projects? You will get a warning, right? And that's all that is going to happen. Now, we have some time. I'm happy to embarrass myself and run this and show you what it looks like. So bear with me. I have not tried this out. This is something I'm going to experiment with you. So let's do this. Let's try this, okay? So I'm going to go and create another command prompt. So new window. And I'm going to change the color. Let me know what color works best for you, okay? I'm going to show a few colors so we make it easy for everyone to see the screen. Is this color visible to everyone? Let me know what works best, or I'll go with blacks. This good? Okay, this is probably the safest of them all, but let's go quickly to, I'm going to set this up as an M4, Maven 4, okay? And let me just change the screen back to black or dark background, and I will now navigate to Maven 3 code, okay, not to Maven 4 code. I'm going to name Maven 3 code using Maven 4. So cd projects, conference, Maven 4 is awesome, and I'm going to Maven 3, okay. So I'm using an older version of my POM files that has modules, because that was the question, and my Maven version is Maven 4. Good. So this is what we are looking at. Is it compatible? I'm going to do a Maven clean install. Actually, let's pass in a version minus d revision equals 3. Actually, 4.7.7. Okay, just some random number. Let's see what happens. I'm using Maven 4, yes? It gives me some warnings, right? I got some warnings here, and I got a warning that my version is not locked for some things. Maven clean plugin, Maven install plugin. I didn't lock the versions. It still uses CI friendly Maven plugin because I still have that plugin set up there. It is not using Apache Maven 4 features. It's using the third party library because that's what Maven 3 had. And the build just worked fine. And this has modules, it doesn't have, here, let me just show you. This is the Maven 3 code base, and in my root POM, I have modules. I don't have subprojects, and it worked. Now, let's do the opposite experiment. I'm going to take this module section from Maven 3 and move it to Maven 4. So here, instead of subprojects, I'm going to list them as modules. So I'm using Maven 4, and my Maven 4 POM XML, where my module version is 4.1.0, I use modules. So let's take a look at this. So here, I'm now going to navigate to the Maven 4 source code. So cd ... and I'm going to Maven 4. Okay, and here I am, and I'm doing this live coding. I've not practiced this, so bear with me as I embarrass myself doing this. Okay, and now I'm going to do 4.9.9 because I decided to do that. All right, so let's see what this brings us. You see this? I don't know why this pop-up doesn't go away. Sorry about that. But come on, do you see this section here? This only worked on Maven 4 when you were using the schema 4.1.0. So if you were using your old code base and you use modules, nothing happened. But if you use the new schema and you use Maven 4, it gives you this warning saying modules deprecated. So backward compatibility exists, but when you port over to the new schema, that's when you come to know that something was wrong. So you're safe with your old code bases. You're unsafe when you change your model schema to 4.1.0. So Maven has kept it very consistent and easy for you to understand what's going on. Awesome. So I don't know if there are any other questions. Good? Yes, please. Yes. So Maven, that's a very interesting question. Maven wrapper is now built into Maven 4. So you don't have to do much. It actually seamlessly works.
How long version 3 branch continues, or after 3.9.9 is it going to be 4?
There is nothing that prevents a further, that will be up to the project owners to decide, but I don't see any reason for them to immediately cut over from a 3.x to a 4.x. Maybe there will be a vestigial support for some amount of time, but that's a question that we can ask the Maven contributors and then find out. But I don't see a reason why Maven 3.x cannot continue for a little bit longer as people start adopting to Maven 4.x. I would prefer Maven, people going to, at least my team's going to Maven 4.x because it makes life easier. But you know, certain times, certain projects will take longer to navigate over. So let's see. But yeah, as long as you just use the Maven 4 executables, your Maven 3 compatible POM files should still work. So this, as long as you have a stable version, everything is fine. Good. Awesome. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.